What's up, friends? We're going live on another stream today. And let's see, let's share the screen. I think we're all ready to go. So, what we are looking at today is we had a working project. It looks pretty good. Like we can do some, I guess if you're here for the first time, we're building a sort of Pokemon battle scene builder. So as you can see, it's probably looks kind of similar if you've ever seen a Pokemon scene or Pokemon battle, where we've got the Pokemon that we're fighting, the status information up in the top left, the actual image of it in the top right, and then we've got this like platform and status bar at the bottom that would represent you or the trainer. And the whole idea behind this app is a tool to sort of build out fun banner images for like Twitter, really. So if we go to, what is it, Twitter, and we go to like my profile, you can see that I used it to build this little banner image where it looks kind of like I'm down in the bottom left and I'm in a battle with this JavaScript logo in the top right. So that was the idea, or that was the inspiration, and I think we did a pretty good job getting there. We've got like a placeholder thing that shows what it would look like. You can change the width and height of the scene. You can change the location and the time of day, and it kind of adjusts accordingly. And then you can change, some things about the opponent, like maybe you want to fight a different Pokemon. You can change some information about you as the trainer. You can say, I want to show a status bar, or I want to show, this text box, whatever. So functionally, it's pretty much there. I mean, functionally, it's doing all right. However, as we've built this, we've kind of been focusing on getting everything to work, but not and trying to follow best practices. But I think that we've gone, some things have started to look a little bit not ideal, right? So let's see, what have we got? So today, I think we're going to be doing a little bit of cleanup on the app, getting rid of things like that, like unnecessary comments, and we'll just kind of walk through and look for opportunities to refactor things and clean it up. So hopefully, this will be kind of enlightening, like sharing my thoughts around refactoring and how I approach it, and you might like it. You might enjoy that. So I think a good example of this may be doing something like this, like showing the different scenes or different settings pages, right? Like all of these could actually be separate forms. Or I guess at the bottom, we kind of have this one generate. Yeah, so it could be like separate parts to the same form, right? So that's kind of a good natural place to start. The app is kind of broke into maybe like 3 sections. You have kind of a title section, you have kind of the form section, and then you have the results. So we've done a little bit of breaking it out that way and just like, I don't know, looking for opportunities to abstract things and put things in their own isolated place. So I'm going to keep doing that and see if we can clean things up so that they look a little bit more easier to deal with, a little bit more maintainable. So I'm going to start with that. I think the battle banner is like, whatever, that part is done and it's fine. I am going to add a little bit of space under that paragraph. So class equals, and we're going to say margin block end of 16 should be good. Give us a little bit of breathing room. That's looking a bit better. I don't think we're going to do a whole lot of design today, although I do want to get into some design stuff. And as I say that, I actually realize that I kind of want to do this thing. So this tab list, I kind of want this to be like display flex maybe, so that, no, what do I want? Display grid, and then grid template columns, maybe like repeat 3, 1 FR, so that they're all kind of the same size. I think that looks pretty good. So right after saying, is that MBE class part of Vue? No. Vue does not provide any sort of CSS for you, at least not that I'm aware of. So all of the classes you'll see here, these are classes that I wrote. They kind of follow the Atomic CSS naming conventions or ideology. Tailwind CSS is going to be the #1 library today that follows Atomic CSS, but there's a lot about Tailwind that I don't personally like. So I just have this CSS file where I wrote some base kind of generic HTML CSS rules, and then I went into some Atomic CSS stuff. So all of these rules here are things that are little helper classes that essentially one class corresponds to run one CSS rule, and it makes it easy to like add one little thing as I need it and kind of compose all of my styles together. So the margin one is right here. MBE16 stands for margin block end, and I use rem units instead of pixels. So it's kind of like margin block end 16 pixels is the equivalent to 1 rem. It's a kind of the sort of pattern that I follow. I wish there was an easier way to do some of this, automate some of this. Maybe I'll make a library at some point. I've tried a couple of times to do something around a CSS library, and I just haven't quite got it. So right now, just adding them as I need them, and on a one-person team, it works for me because it works with what I know. If I was on a larger team, I'd probably reach for something like Tailwind, because that way, one of the big benefits of using a third-party library is they usually have documentation already written out. So no one has to, no one's trying to figure out what the naming convention was that I came up with, and might have in several files or some weird places. It's just like third-party documentation makes it easy for everyone to get on the same page. So yes, this is margin block end. What am I doing? I am refactoring this app. That's right. I'm doing a little bit of styles. So yeah. So what I need to do for this little bit of styles that I want to add, just so these kind of look okay, is I need to essentially just recreate the little styles that I have locally. So where did I put that? Here we go. On this Vite.js tab list, I think what I can do, I kind of want to copy the CSS, but this CSS here, it's actually it's a really good candidate for Atomic CSS. So here in my Vite.js classes, right, I can use class and say class equals like background white. I think that's one that I have, right? And what that will do is that adds the class here. Whoops, that was a little bit big. That adds the class here on the wrapper component or the wrapper element around all of the tabs. That's not what I want. I want my classes or my custom styles to go onto this element. Ooh, and in fact, I'm seeing that we might run into an issue here soon. Okay, I've got this. So putting the class on the component itself is going to apply that class name to the wrapper element, which is not what we want. We want it on the tab list inside of the wrapper. So Vutensils offers a prop, or you can pass a prop to Vutensils. Oops, come on. There we go. That it can take an object and you can specify. I mean, you might have to look at the documentation to figure out. I guess we can do that. Vutensils. And we'll go to the docs and we'll see the tabs. And all the way at the bottom, there's the custom classes. And we can see that we can add classes to the root element, to the tab list, and to the tab itself. So I want to add to the tab list. I should probably enable it for the tab as well, but we don't have that. But anyway, I want to add some classes to the tab list. So one of them that I want to add is an atomic class called grid. Let's see. So let's see. Let's just see if this works. Let's close that. Let's close that. And that. There we go. So we're giving a prop of classes. It is an object, and in that object, we're saying the tab list should have a class of grid. So we go on there and we go back to our app. We can see, if I reload, just to make sure everything starts over, we can see that we did get a change in the styles here. So our tab list is now has a class of tab list and grid. Great. Now we want to make sure that that grid is a 3-column grid. So we don't have a class for that yet. For grid items, it looks like we actually have 2 classes for grid. That's a mistake. Actually, that one's fine. This one needs to go. So we've got place item center, justify content. I want to create a class for columns, a 3-column grid. So I'm going to say columns -3, and that's going to say, yeah, grid template columns, 1FR, 1FR, 1FR. That would work. We can also say repeat and say that we want to repeat 3 times. And the 1FR is the units that we want it to repeat. And then I think there's a way to say, to have it sort of auto wrap, but we'll just keep this for now. So columns 3, go back to my app. Now I'm going to say it's going to be the class of grid, and columns 3 should have, yep, taken its effect. It's in the right place. There we go. We have a 3-column grid. And because everything is 1FR unit, it's all taking up the same size. So they're all the same size, which is great. Okay, that's a little bit of styling that I said I wasn't going to do. So now I want to work on the actual refactoring and like componentization and organization of my code. All right, so V button, let's see here. What am I actually not using? I'm not using V button, so let's get rid of that. Let's delete that. I don't think I'm using either vform or vinput, so we can get rid of those. And then index.js, we are not using these 3, so we'll get rid of those. Okay. We can close that down. So now I can see I've got my app, and then I've got my app preview and my app SVG. I think it's considered kind of a good practice, or at least in the Vue world ecosystem, it's considered a good practice to always name your components with at least 2 parts to the name. So you see we have app preview here and app SVG. Sure, I could have named those preview and SVG, but in fact, that highlights what one of the problems that you can run into if you name something with a single name. So think like preview. If I were to name this component just preview, then when I use that component, so down here in my template, if I were to use the component named as just preview, there is the opportunity or the possibility that HTML will release an element called preview. So it will be a single HTML elements. They're all by default or by not convention, but the rules around HTML is that every HTML tag only has a single name, a single part name. So it's possible that HTML will release a preview element, at which point Vue won't really know if this is supposed to be my custom component, which is the preview component, or if it's supposed to be using the HTML preview tag, right? This hypothetical tag that may come at some point in the future. So to avoid all that, it's generally considered best practice to use a two-part naming convention. That way you don't have to worry about HTML tag name collisions in the future. So that's one thing. Right, so we want to do a little bit more of that. We have, like I said before, we have kind of three parts to this form, right? We've got the scene. So I'm going to take all the code from that scene, and I'm going to cut that. And I'm going to replace it with a component called, I don't know. Let's see. What do I want to call it? It's like the settings scene, I guess. That's pretty good. Settings scene. And we'll have that be a self-closing tag. A self-closing tag means you only call it once and you have this backslash or slash greater than. A not self-closing tag would be if I have it like there's two parts to the tag, the opening and the closing parts. And if I was going to put some content here, then I would want to have a standard tag. But because I'm not actually going to put any content within the like slot of the component, it's all going to be self-contained. We don't need to do that. So now up here, we're going to create a new component called settings scene.view. And oops, let's see, template. Oh, come on. Where's my Vue helper stuff? Well, whatever. Template. We'll close that and we'll paste in all of the parts to that. Okay, and that is just going to be a field set. And that's looking good so far. That's all that we've got. We've got a bunch of red squiggly lines because obviously data is not defined. Update date is data is not defined. V input is not defined. But for the time being, we'll come back to this. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and just like, let's see, comment out everything that has logic in it or relies on dynamic data or some data attributes. And I'm just going to leave this as the field set with the scene here, the text here of scene. All right, so the next part is we need to actually import this. Now, I want to mention that the naming convention I chose around this is kind of important. Notice that I went settings scene and not scene settings. And the reason why that is important is because when we add a new file and we name it settings, what's the other part? Opponent.view. Because we're using the broader term first and then the more specific identifier, it means in our code base, those files live right next to each other. So if I ever need to change things about the settings, I can go between the opponent and the scene, and then eventually we'll add this other one called settings trainer.view. And yeah, that works pretty well. As we get more components, we may want to break this up into folders. So we could have a folder called settings inside of which we could put settings opponent, settings scene, and settings trainer. I think for this application, we're not going to get to that point because it's not going to reach that level of complexity. So no need to overcomplicate things too early. Okay, what do we have in utils? We have just that throttle. That's fine. Okay, going back to our app. Now what I want to do is in my app, I have two options when I have to consider registering a component. I can register components locally, so within the file where they're being used, I can import and register the component, or I can register components globally, meaning at the root of the application, I can say, hey, app, Vue app, anywhere that you see this component or this like name, it corresponds to this component. We'll look at that in a moment. But for the time being, because settings scene is the component we're working with, and I know that it's not going to be used anywhere else in the application. It's not really a global thing. It makes sense to just keep it as a local component. So I'm going to say import. Why is it doing all that? Nope. Import, and I'm going to say settings scene from / components settings scene .view. Notice here that I am treating the settings scene slightly different than I'm treating app preview and app SVG. To me, the reason why I'm doing it this way is because I actually don't want to put settings scene in this index file. I could. It doesn't make much of a difference functionally. It would make the code a little bit shorter because I could just import it alongside the other components. The reason why I'm leaning towards not doing that, and this may be the wrong decision, but once again, that's because this element or this component is only going to be used in one place. So it's not like I'm going to have a bunch of need to import this in many, many different files, in which case it would make sense to have it here in the default or the index export of the components folder. So yeah, I'm just putting it there, and I think that makes sense to me. Now that we have that component available, we can go down to our page. Okay, I guess we already have it there. So if I hit save, I think it should work. Yeah, it looks like we're on the scene, and I can see that the field set should be in there with the legend of scene and all of the commented out other components. So that's working as expected. We have the scene in the right place, which means our component is there. Now we need to go back to the settings scene, and we actually have to get all of this working again. So let's see. We've got a lot of work to do here. We've got some data to work with. We've got a method that we need to work with here, like update data. We've got some like things we need to display. So how do we want to do this? The first thing I want to do is just get this V input working correctly. So in app view, where we're actually registering app view, we are doing that, V input. We are pulling that in from Vutencil source. I don't want to do that because if I bring in V input here, right, I copy this and I say, I know I'm going to need a script tag anyway. So let's go script setup. And then, yeah, we can close that. So I could do this, right, and say, I know that I need this input. So I could just import it, and then this is now going to be available. I don't think that's such a great idea because I know I'm going to have to do this in two other files. I'm using this across all of the settings components. So rather than do that here, this one to me makes more sense as a global component. So I think I just undid all that work. Now I want to redo it. I know that, let's see, this button component, this forms component, this input component, I'm going to want to use. So let's see if we can register this input component. I really want to get this plugin to work. So let's say app.use, and then I want to import utensils. So I should be able to do this where, no, it's doing some weird stuff. I want this to say components, and I think I should be able to pass in an array with the input in there. So copy and paste, comment that out so I just have it available if I need it. Get rid of that. This should not be working now. Okay, so in theory, I guess we can do this both ways. I'm going to see if I got this. Looks like this is not working. Oh, no, that makes sense. Okay. Let's go back here and let's see if we can just get the v input working. So let's comment out this stuff. We're getting rid of all the red squigglies. These presets and this @change event, I think I'm also going to comment those out because right now I just want to confirm that v input is like set up correctly. So let's go v input, and we're going to say, what is it? What does it need? A label equals test, and the name equals test. Okay. Okay, cool. It looks like v input is registered correctly. That makes me happy because I feel like that was broken the first time I tried. But this is also using, well, this is like the Vue.js documentation, or the documented way of registering components with utensils. I also want to show you how we could do that with Vue, like the default way of registering a global component with Vue is like this. You would say app.component, give it a name, and give it a component definition. So we're importing the component definition from Vutensils, and then we're naming it with the same name, essentially, which means if I reload, there you go. Once again, Vutensils, the input component is working correctly because we're passing the component definition here. I could call this v, like, what is it? vn put, right? Something like that. So now this would represent the component tag name, which we can see that kind of broke our application because now this is going to say something like Vue doesn't recognize. They're not going to tell me that. There you go. It doesn't know what v input is. That's because we've given it a different name here. So if I go to this scene and I replace it, we have the v custom tag name of v input, which means because v input corresponds to our utensils input component, it's there. I've just spent a lot of time explaining that. I hope that it makes sense. I'm going to get back to what I was doing now. So let's see. In main.js, yes, I'm going to get rid of all this and get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of this one and just import utensils. I'll move that up. I'm going to move that up here because I think I like to have my NPM dependencies above my local dependencies. And then what do I need? I know that v input is a global component. I also happen to know that v form V input, V button. Those are 3 that I'm going to want. Utensils by default does not register any components, so you have to explicitly list which ones you want in your app. And I think we're still working. Everything is still working. We can see I can go to the different tabs, and those inputs are working. The form and the button is working as well, and we can test. That everything is working. So I need the tabs too. We can test that everything is working by going to our app and removing the reference to those components. So now they're no longer locally registered. They're only globally registered, which means we can put them in any component throughout our application and they will work. So looks like the tabs is working fine. Looks like the inputs are working fine. Looks like the button is working fine and the form is working fine. Great. Cool. Okay, so now with all of the components or the global components in place, we need to get back to our local components. I need this component to work, which means I think what I'm going to do this. I think I'm going to what I'm going to do is get this working one input at a time or one section at a time. So right now we know that V input should work, or it does work. We've tested it. But now we've got this event, or we've got this data that we need to bind to it. So what I could do is, I guess, a couple of things. A couple of things to keep in mind here is the options here is the information that this component needs in order to like build out the presentation. Where does it get that information from? Let's see, we've got presets somewhere, presets here. And this data, we use it. We have presets and select preset. And outside of that, this is the only place that these are used, right? Okay, which means since the presets are only used in one place, we actually, the larger app doesn't really care about these presets. We only need them in order to render each of the options in this element or in this input, which means I can actually just put them here and this should work. Like the presets should render. Let me comment this out. And at this point, we should see those presets rendering on the page. Sure enough, there they are. I say sure enough as if every time I say something should work, it works, when in reality, only like 50% of the time it works. But it definitely makes me feel better to be like, sure enough, as I expected, it worked. Anyway, so everything's working as expected to get these rendered to the page. And there's nowhere else. I'm going to turn this down so I can actually think. So the important thing here, my thought process here, is that there is nowhere else in this application that relies on these presets being defined. Nowhere else that needs to know about these presets. However, what these presets control is the size of the preview, right? The size of the image that we're going to generate. So now we have a little bit of the same data being needed in multiple places. We need to know the data in the inputs of the width and the height, but we also need to know the data for the preview to know how the width and the height that it should represent. And the way that we share data that way, there's a couple different ways, but we can't, unfortunately, we can't just keep all of that data in the settings scene because the preview needs to know about that data. So the way that you share data with, or one option to share data with an application like this is instead of keeping data just in one spot, we have to share it. In order to share it, you have kind of this hierarchy of components. So let's see, our settings, or our scene settings, or settings scene element or component is now a child of the app component. And then the other child of the app component is the preview, right? So they kind of have a shared ancestor. And eventually you can pass the data up far enough to the shared ancestor that then that shared ancestor can pass the data down to all of its descendants that need that data. Hopefully that makes sense. It should make a little more sense in a moment once I finish writing this or hooking this all up. So let's do that. The shared data that needs to be present is, what did I do here? I need to undo that. Is once this change event occurs on this element, we need to actually change the width and height in this data, right? This is the function that we want to call. This is the function we want to call. So we can define it here so that it's available. So now select preset is here. That's select preset. And it's going to work with the event target value. So we've got, let's see. This is where we're updating the width and the height. Okay. So the data width and the data height, we really have no way of, like, the data, the width. What I was explaining earlier is that the width and the height is the data that needs to be shared across multiple sibling components, which means we can't define it here in this child component and provide access to a different sibling component at the same time. In order for that data to be shared, we have to take this data out of the child component. Rated! What's up, Stony Eagle? Let's see. How are we doing? You just caught me in the middle of trying to sound smart. What's up, Brent? You were on a stream earlier today, right? How'd it go? Continue sounding smart. Okay. For everyone that just joined, we are doing some refactoring, which I think is actually can be somewhat interesting because it's one thing to watch someone code, but if you actually it's also interesting to see them explain their thought process about how they're coding stuff. So yeah, we like smat sounding people. We try to be too. Mark Boots is from must be from Boston. Just kidding. I didn't mean to give you a hard time. Yeah, so I'm trying to explain some refactoring stuff. And I think the tough thing about refactoring right now is if you don't have a background or familiarity with modern JavaScript applications and sort of state management, this is like a weird concept to understand. But you have parent components and you have child components. So if we look at the application that we're building, it's broken into sort of three parts. You have the overall application, which is the whole parent component. Then you have this like left side of the screen that has some settings, which this would be like child component settings or child component form. And then on the right side of the screen, you have the actual preview. And the tough thing is, how do you get data from a child component, the form child component, to affect the preview child component? Because one of the things that we do is when we set the scene, we can modify the width and height of this thing. Or if I change the Pokemon here, right, on the left-hand side of the screen, we need that to be reflected on the right-hand side of the screen. So the difficult thing is explaining how that relationship between data is shared between components. And the way that you do that is you kind of move the data up from the child component up into a shared ancestor. So the app component, right? App is the parent, form is child 1, preview is child 2. So any shared data has to move up to the app. You have no knowledge of Vue, but React is just using something like Redux. That's another good point. Depends on the application, depends on the complexity of the application. For an app like this, you probably don't need Redux. And actually, I wanted to get to this concept of a global store as well, where on one hand, you can have all of the shared state go up to the nearest ancestor, the nearest shared ancestor. And that ancestor is responsible for managing and manipulating the state and then passing that new information down to each component via props, right? Which we'll get to if you're not familiar. The concept of like Redux, or this concept of a global store, is where you take that state management responsibility and you take it away from the parent component or the top level component, and you put it into this sort of abstracted location in memory. And the application can then interact with that global store independently of climbing up and down the component tree. The downside to that is it does add some more complicated architecture to your application. Of course, if you're used to building things that way, that's fine. There is also the overhead of adding more code to your project. So for a simple application like this, I would not reach for a global store because it's one like page, and it's only a couple of components, and the distance that data needs to travel to traverse from one component to whatever other component needs that data is not very far. So it's not super complicated. But yeah, eventually if you reach a certain level of complexity, then it makes sense to bring in a third-party library or dependency that will make your application a little more complicated, a little bit larger bundle, but that cost is offset by the amount of maybe performance improvement, or it like could theoretically simplify complexity, because now instead of traversing all of your application logic to go up the dependent or the component tree and then down to get to the other target component, prop drilling, that complexity gets taken away and you're just like interfacing with a global store. Prop drilling is just as much work in its first creation, but a refactor requires way more work compared to using a state manager. That's true. And I think this is a really interesting point, because I think this conversation actually needs to take place before you start talking about prop drilling or state management or anything like that. Like, once you need to have that conversation before you even start coding your application, like understanding of the complexity of the application and what are the feature requirements. And then you say, cool, at some point, could be relatively early, you say, this is going to get more complex, or this has such potential to grow to a level of complexity that we don't want to build it one way, reach the point where we've outgrown that option, and then try and shoehorn in a new methodology like a global store, right? It makes way more sense to take that, do the work up front of integrating a global store, knowing that you're going to reach the tilting point where the benefits outweigh the costs. That's my thoughts on it. For this app, it doesn't make sense to have a global store, because honestly, it's never going to get much more complex than this. We're going to build out a Pokemon battle scene and then use it to like generate the image. There's not going to be user accounts. There's not going to be, I don't know, a whole lot of things. So yeah, that's a call, and the data only really needs to traverse like one or maybe two levels up in components and then back down. Which even two levels can get kind of can be kind of a lot, but this should only ever go one level up and one level back down, which I think is fine. Okay, so taking all of that nebulous conversation that we just had and actually applying it to the data that we're looking at, we have in this like settings panel, we have two bits of data that don't belong here. That is the width of the preview and the height of the preview, right? We need that data here because the input on this page is what controls the width and height, but the width and height is also going to be used in the preview. So this data needs to be stored in the parent or the app itself. So we no longer need this function here. Building a web shop on Laravel, and you started with React, tried prop drilling, and gave up within 2 hours. Yeah, have you tried anything besides Redux though with React? I know that Redux is kind of the de facto React global store, but man, the amount of ceremony that you need to do, you need to do like special incantations and like put these files all over. It was just so much overhead to modify the store that I was like, Redux is not my jam. Okay, where was I? I wanted to manage my global state, which we have here. So we have the width and height defined here already in the app component. Sounds like some wizardry you're getting into. But damn, that works. But it damn works that good. Yeah. I mean, definitely there's something to be said about if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that sort of also with Redux, there's something to be said about it being so popular that you can hire a lot of people or like a lot of people that join your organization that have that Redux knowledge. Using popular libraries makes it easier to pull from a pool of candidates that are familiar with that tooling. So there's something to be said about that. But still, it's so painful. I don't think I would. I wouldn't voluntarily choose Redux for a project. Okay, what am I trying to do? We've got data already in the app. So now with Vue, we have to basically pass that information up to the parent, right? And the way that we do that is with events. So we have our options listing, and then we listen to the change event and we run this function. And the way that we trigger a custom event with Vue is with the emit keyword. So yeah, share a link. Let's check it out. Stony Eagle taking the mic. Put the music back up. Please don't stop your sentence to reply. Yeah, you know what? I don't even know what I was trying to say. that ADHD hits hard, or ADD. Well, see, there you go. It just happened again. Hell yeah. Oh my gosh, Contra. Nice callback. Contra is such a good game. Did y'all play Metal Slug? Metal Slug, I can't tell you how much money I threw away at our local ice cream shop because they had a Metal Slug arcade box, or what are they called? Cabinets? Yeah. Okay. Let's actually do what we're intending to do. So we want to use Vue's method for emitting a custom event, because the way for app to know, let's see, here we are. in app where we're actually rendering our new component settings scene, for it to know that anything has changed, it needs to listen to a custom event. So we're going to listen to like at, here's another hot tip. We could listen to like the at change event, right? Equals something. We'll just say log. The problem with doing things this way is that, let's see, because we're listening to the change event here, it may be tempting to also, let me see, I'm going to comment this out because it won't know what to do once it gets to this line. So it might be tempting to say, well, if we're going to do stuff on the change event here, it might make sense to call the event, our custom event, the same thing, right? And I believe if I go to the console right now and I trigger a change, so we will see that event take place. The problem here is that we have just confused Vue because technically we are putting a real change or a real event listener onto this div rather than listening to a custom event. Now, what's a custom event? For anyone that is not familiar, let's see. Custom event or just events. Where's emit? How do I emit with the composition API? Emit composition. Or there we go. Maybe. So what do we got? Oh, okay. Two movies are from Blender are okay to stream. Okay, let's check this out really quick. It sounds like there's movies, so I'm going to pause the music really quick. Oh man, that is a long URL. Right, and we've got... Come on. Come on, baby. Copy, paste, and then we'll cut the password and paste. No Mercy TV, the effortless encoder. Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you can already see that this is like a much more in-depth application. I like that animation. We also, what is going on with that? What happened down there? Huh. I love this. This is looking great. I mean, I don't even know what it's. Yeah, is it going to do that little? I don't know if you. Yeah, that swappy thing. What's going on there? I don't know, but this is cool. Anime movies. Tears of Steel. So this is not. That's so great. What is this? Okay, I'm not just going to sit here and let you guys watch me watch this, but I might come back and watch that because that looked pretty funny. Firefox. So this isn't this is not Firefox. This is, what am I using? Brave browser. Cast. Okay. Crew. Media. Is this using like the IMDb API or something? This is a pretty cool little project. Now I wonder. What's all this? Let's see. This is pretty nice. This is like, I mean, clearly it looks like you're still working on it because this is, the preview page that you showed me or that you sent, and it looks like maybe test data in it. But this is looking cool. I really like this. Does it slowly fade out? Yeah. Little scroll triggered animation or scroll triggered opacity change. That's nice. Yeah, this is definitely the sort of project where Remix makes sense because obviously, or not Remix, Redux, because obviously you want to maybe have some shared information across the entire app. For example, if I'm a logged in user, you want this little like logged in user bar to be present across the entire application. Although, technically you could do that with the nav bar being its own component that never really changes. Um, Server got disconnected. Uh-oh. Yeah, man, it's okay. It's curious to see other people's apps and try and dissect how it's broken up in the different components. And also, I'm trying to think now that you told me that you're using Redux. I'm curious where that Redux global store is being implemented. Probably in the nav bar with the user information, maybe with notifications as well. I think that you could have global store or global state information about like maybe the top 10 or the 10 most recent films or whatever this like continue watching, some of these recent data, so you have them right there readily available. So if I click on one of these, not only do I have the information here that says like the image and the title, but when I click on it, there's obviously, oh, that's not what I wanted. I want to go to the landing page for it. If I click on it, yeah, it might have already brought with it this information about, um, the description and some of this other stuff. By the way, I would really, um, recommend. I don't know what's going on here, but I can't seem to select any of this information. I feel like I should be able to like double click or click and drag, and I can't seem to copy and paste any of it. I don't know if that was on purpose. Maybe you have some pointer events, none or something on there. Oh, it's disabled. You did that on purpose. So user hostile. What if I wanted to translate this or like search, what is this? Ode Kirk. Yeah. Well, and if there's a good reason to disable text selection, mm, I'm sure you thought about that, but otherwise, it's kind of, to me, like that's kind of annoying. Translate is built in, like language translation. Maybe that's what it is. Gets localized data from the server. Okay. Well, there's something there that I don't quite understand. Is why would like localization or translation data be impact how I can click and drag and a fully Dutch view when you open it? Yeah, that's pretty cool. That is one thing that I've never really done a lot of work on is localization, which is serving different languages for different users. Best I've done, I have done adding Google Translate. Used to have a little widget you could put on the page that would like translate it with JavaScript, but yeah, I've never done a lot of real legitimate internationalization. Okay, back to what I was saying before. about this event listener. So yeah, I don't know in the composition API how you emit events. So script setup, emit, define emits, change and delete. Okay, but how do I actually do that? Hey, props to you for making that a translatable app. That is kind of like related to accessibility. So I'm all for that. I'm not very good at it because I've never done it before, and I've never had someone pay me to do it, which is usually a really good way to learn how to do stuff is when you do it for work. But yeah, I don't know. All right, music is coming back on. And let's see here. So with Vue, I'm trying to use this. I'm trying to build this app. Let's see, opponents and trainer we can get rid of. I'm trying to build this app using the sort of new composition API way of doing things in Vue. Part of this I haven't done before, so also a learning process for me. With the traditional or like with the options API with Vue, you would say this dot $ emit. You'd pass your custom event name, so it could be like, I don't know, size change, right? Change, right? Like that is not an event that is recognized by the DOM or the window or like, yeah, JavaScript to be a legitimate event. So what this does is actually tells Vue of a custom event that the component can listen to, or I guess the parent component can listen to. And then the second parameter is whatever the payload would be. Payload. So I need to figure out how to do that with the composition API. And I do see define props while define emits accepts the same value as the emits option. Okay, great. Declare props and emits using pure type annotations. Okay, this is going to take just a moment. Composition API. Reactivity, lifecycle hooks, dependency injection. Okay. Context.emit. So that's what I would want to tap into in order to emit an event. Now, the setup function provides that. Maybe it is just define emits. Define emits. Okay, the child component can emit an event itself by calling the built-in $emit method. Yes, that's what I'm looking at right now. Define emits. Okay, define process and devices are compiler macros only usable inside of script setup. Perfect. That's what I want. Define emits. Okay. I think. I got it. Okay, this makes sense. Okay, so got it. We are going to define emits. That's what we're doing. Up here, let's see. We've got some data. We've got the presets data that we're using in our options, right? Let me see. this app in PHP and Laravel before, and it comes with translation out of the box. Had to match it. Yeah. There's something about using things that just work and then trying to like rebuild something entirely yourself. And man, using things that just work is great. Okay, so I have define props. No? Define props. No? Yeah, define props. So this is a weird thing. This is something I don't think I like this about Vue at the moment. Is that there are these magic functions. So one thing that the Vue composition API has done a little bit better is make some TypeScript things easier to do and also make things a little bit more explicit about what's going on. One thing that the Vue ecosystem has always kind of had a problem with is this like black box magic sort of system, things that just happen. And that's a result of Vue being primarily used with the single file components and therefore dependent on a transpilation step. Meaning, when you have a component.vue file, like the browser doesn't know what the heck to do with that, right? There's a step in the build pipeline that says, every time you see a .vue file, take that file and split it into its separate parts. This script block gets turned into whatever JavaScript it needs to be, or it's already mostly JavaScript. This template block looks like HTML, but in fact, what the transpiler will do is find each of these elements and convert them also into JavaScript, a bit of JavaScript that returns like a JavaScript representation of this HTML template that Vue can then use. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. What time do you stream? I'll also give you a real tour of my app. Yeah, I'd be down. It seems like you were streaming just before me. Okay, but to the point that I was saying, like this define emits, as far as we're concerned, we have no idea where this is coming from. And someone who's not familiar with the Vue ecosystem is going to come here potentially to our component and say, cool, I kind of understand that Vue has these single file component things that end with .vue. I know that there's some HTML in there. I know that there's some JavaScript, but then there's these magic functions that aren't defined anywhere. And we need to have the knowledge that this exists sort of in the global scope, and Vue will look at this file, find this, and do the magic stuff that replaces this with actual functionality. 2 p.m. GMT +1. All right, I will figure out what that means in Pacific Standard. So define emits. So what define emits is it's going to take these keywords and it's going to return an object, I believe. With on that object, we have all of this stuff, which isn't actually helpful, but gives us an object with the methods, I believe. So here we have emit.change, or we have emit.delete. Now, as I mentioned before earlier, I don't think it's a good idea to name our custom functions or our custom events after real DOM events, because then you end up with a collision of what it actually means for something to change. Technically, right now, listening to a change event listener here on my component is actually adding the change event listener to the DOM node. Whereas if we have some custom event like at size change, right? Doing things this way, the DOM won't actually ever trigger anything for at size change. So if, for example, I go back to my app and instead of change, I listen to size change, and I'm just like logging 5 or 8 a.m. Whoa, 8 a.m. I could probably do. 5 a.m. probably not. So what happens is, we accidentally got distracted and added a typo to our app and then left it there. So what happens is, before we were listening to like an actual DOM change event, which meant it was the change event was added to the div here. And I'm not going to explain the whole bubbling and propagation of lifecycle events or event life cycles. But before, it was actually logging something, and now it's not actually doing anything, because this is now listening to a custom event, not a real DOM event. Long story short, don't name your custom events after real events. Stony Eagle, you want to stop distracting me, and yet you keep saying stuff, knowing full well that it's going to distract me. So you are chaotic good, I think. No, it's totally fine. I can multitask. And I can get back on track. And this show, like, I would really, yeah. Brent knows what's up. He's a master lurker here. No, like, I want this show to be interactive anyway. Like, I get bored if I'm just here feeling like I'm talking to. I mean, I know to you guys it looks like I'm talking to you, and I am like looking at you right now. To me, this is just a camera. Like, it's just a shiny kind of fish globy thing. So it's a lot more comfortable if I see some reactions. Okay, so now that we've defined our custom events, we can actually trigger them. So with this defined, it is now this emit. With this defined inside of a setup script, this is now available within our, well, I guess both within the rest of our setup script or in our template. I don't want to use it in the template because I still want to do a little bit of logic before we do anything with that. And what are we doing? So, right. If we have a preset selected, then what we're going to do is use that custom emit. I wonder, hold on. I don't think that's the right syntax. Okay, let's see. Define emits. Okay. Okay. I think I may have had that syntax wrong just a little bit. It's not emit dot size change. It's just emit, and then you declare the event that you're going to emit, and then you pass in the payload. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's cool to talk. Thank you. Yes, the music selection, I think it fits pretty well. I mean, you're only saying that because it's like a Pokemon stream. We were doing, what were we doing before this? Very much on brand. Chaotic. Chaotic and distracted. Before this series of streams, we were doing like, what was that, Brent? Was that the unit testing one? So that was a lot of fun music for a very boring subject. Weather app. Was weather app unit testing and then weather app, or was it weather app and then unit testing? I don't know. Anyway, here we're going to be emitting this custom size change event. Or you know what a good one is update data. Yeah, no. We're going to keep that with actually I'm going to set that to like preset selected. Preset selected, or preset select. Select preset, damn it. Naming things is important. Okay, so we're going to select a preset, and then we're going to pass that preset payload up to the parent component. And that payload is going to, I think, should have the preset width and preset.height. Yeah, that should be good. So that data should be passed up to the parent, which means on the parent, we can listen to a select preset event. Yeah, I think it was unit testing. All right, so now theoretically this should work. Famous last words. That's probably my my tagline. And in this case, it actually did work. So we now have these custom events listeners. We're just receiving the payload that we are defining in that custom event, and we're not getting that change event, right? Because remember, the change event we were listening to was triggering an actual DOM change event, which may be what you want. But once again, a very good reason not to name your things after DOM events is now because this has a custom event name, I can do this. I can say at change, log that change. And so if we go here, we get the default event listener, right? Boom, boom, boom. It's got all the default event stuff. If I were to have renamed this instead of select preset, change, now I think I've actually made it impossible for me to add a real change event listener, because now the change is associated with my custom event, and there's no way for me to do like combine the two. What do I mean by combine the two? Well, let's say I wanted to have both select preset and log that. Oops. Select preset and listen to the change. So now, because I've named them two different things, if I change this, we are going to see both the custom event payload and the true DOM event, like change event payload. That was a really long way of saying that, yeah, don't do that. It's like overriding the fetch API to inject a bearer token for every request. Sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it'd be like saying, what is it? Window.fetch equals console log poop. And then I say fetch https://austingill.com. Fetch is not a fun. Oh, whoops. I did that wrong. Is a function. There we go. And then I say, go fetch that. And now I just get poop. Not what you want to do. Okay. Next things next. We're going to actually complete refactoring at least the settings. So now we're listening to this custom thing, right? We're like halfway there. When the preset changes, rather than logging that, what do we want to do? Essentially, we need to set the width and the height. I think I can do this kind of an easy way. Is I can say I basically need to update the width and height here with the width and height that we get from our custom payload. And I think the sort of easy way might be to do, and Stony Eagle, since you're not using Vue, you may be used to like React, where you have a custom event listener that's like console log or whatever, or you can do a reference to a function name, like my function. In Vue, you can actually do, this is again a little bit of that magic that it handles under the hood for you without actually explaining, but it's a convenient thing. You could actually say something like data equals 2. So normally an event handler, you need to do within a function declaration, but you can actually do like you can kind of put the body of the function here. So if you just need very simple data manipulation, it's kind of nice. For example, I can say object.assign, maybe, hopefully, I want to object.assign into my data object, which is my reactive data. And I want to assign the payload or the value of the event. As we mentioned in a previous stream, Vue has this event keyword, which is the value of that event. So hopefully this will work. If I change my size from the default to large, oh, look at that. We get the large size. If we go back to a extra small, it's working. Pretty snazzy, if you ask me. Okay, so that is the preset. Now we've got some more legwork to do with the rest of these inputs. I'm going to do this one input at a time. So I'm just going to keep cutting and pasting this little thing. Like having plain HTML and JS isn't enough hacking. Man, these React folks, they just don't understand how good it is in other languages or other frameworks. So it's so much. It's like putting on a cozy sweater. Like when you go outside, React people, they just like to go outside in the snow naked because that is the pure functional way of walking around. And Vue folks like to go out in the snow wearing cozy sweaters and slippers. I'm just kidding. React folks are great. Okay, so we got another thing. We have some more work to do here. Okay, we have. Why are we doing vModel and at change update data? Okay, we don't need to change anything here. All of this is static. No, I know. I'm just throwing shade your way because I'm feeling like our relationship has reached that level that, you know, we've reached an understanding. I don't actually I like React. I know that you're not hating on Vue, and it's all good. I think all things that move the JavaScript ecosystem forward as a whole are good things. You know, Angular, Svelte, they're all bringing cool new ideas that influence the language and influence other frameworks to do better. Oh, you want to bring it? All right. Yeah, we're there. Nice response. I got it. I like it. Okay, let's get this other input in place. So we have Mr. Madness. All right. Razz him right back. Razzle dazzle. Here it comes. Now we're gonna take this. You know what? When I join one of your streams, then we'll see once the tables have turned how it goes. I'm gonna distract you so hard. Okay, so this input event is listening to change, and then it's triggering some update data function, which we don't have defined in this component because update data is defined up here somewhere. Update data. So this is an interesting one. So update data, just like I was saying, we don't want to override existing DOM events. This is an occasion where I think it might actually make sense. And in fact, let me see here. So when we put the, this is going to be kind of a tough one to explain. When Vue or React or any of these frameworks put a DOM node on the page, take an input, for example, in this case, when they put an input on the page and that framework knows that there's an event listener attached to that DOM node, it knows when the actual underlying framework adds that DOM node to the page, it knows to add an event listener to it. And for every input that we add on the page, we're adding an event listener, right? And then if like some reactive data changes and that input needs to be removed from the page, React or Vue, they know to do some cleanup process and remove that event listener, right? So it handles some of that memory management for you. What you can do, or one of the problems with that approach, not problems, one of the issues you can run into is if you had like 1,000 inputs that you wanted to add to the page on your form for whatever reason, it's also going to attach 1,000 event listeners, which is a lot of extra memory. And especially if those event listeners oh, yeah, Brent, professional lurker for sure, 100%. If you have those 1,000 event listeners on those 1,000 inputs, you can, all of those event listeners are doing the same thing, or like logically the event handler function is logically doing the same thing. You can actually avoid a lot of that memory usage by taking that event listener from being attached to that input and moving it up to a shared parent. So maybe like a whole form. And that way, when the event bubbles up, when the event is triggered on the input, that event will bubble up to the form. The form will also trigger, in this case, like a change event. And when the form captures that change event, it will have access to the event target that input or the event was triggered on. Event delegation, yes. So all of this to say that instead of, if you have 1,000 inputs and 1,000 event listeners, you can very simplify things by taking that event listener and just putting it on the form instead. And it will still capture all of the events for all of the 1,000 inputs that you have. And there's just like a little bit more logic you have to add, because now I think the event target is the form, or you have to like check what the event target is or stuff like that. But let's look at doing that, because the reason why I get into event delegation is because here we have this update data event that we're attaching to all of these inputs. And once again, we're kind of playing the game where we have the event listener on this child component, but the actual data that's being affected is on the parent component. Well, one thing that we can do is, instead of trying to define the event listener on the child component, we can combine both event delegation and this abstraction of components at the same time, and move this change event listener onto the form. And the form is in this parent component. So let's see. We'll say at change, just to kind of represent this, we're going to log this change. Oops. That part always gets me. Okay, so we're going to put this change event listener, which means for every input inside I guess every DOM node that can emit a change event, it's going to bubble up to this form, and this form will actually, this event listener will actually trigger on this form as well. So let's see. We're going to temporarily take this off of that. We're going to remove this V model for the data as well. This is the width. Cool. Okay, so now when this input changes, we should see something logged. The event is going to bubble up to the parent, which is like the form that you can't visually see, but is up around here. Okay, cool. Why can't I type into that? Label, name, type, number. I should be able to type into that. Type. Oh, it's a number. I'm typing a bunch of letters and it's a number input. That's a problem. So if I type into that, nothing's going to happen. When the input loses focus, that's when the change event occurs, as long as the value has actually changed. So I'm going to tab away. We're going to lose focus. The event is logged to the DOM because it was captured by the form. And we can see that the event target is that input that was changed. So that means we can very easily grab all of the information we had in our app, our event listener. Let's see, what was it called? Update data, I think. Update data. So if we look at our update data function, what it does, it expects to receive an event, a DOM event object, from which we can grab the input off of the event target. We can grab the name off of the input name, the type off the input type, and then do all the logic to basically update the reactive data that we have here. So what I'm going to do is say there's a couple things I want to be wary of here. And that is that before, because we're using event delegation, in the previous version, we were not listening to the change event on this input, which means this event would have never fired. But now because it's on the form, it will fire for every input. So now it is firing there, which means we have to be a little bit careful about the logic that we put here. And I think I'm going to keep this kind of simple and hope that it doesn't, I don't know. I'm going to get a little bit clever at the risk of introducing some potential places that it could break. And what I mean by getting clever is I'm going to depend on the name of the input to correspond to the property of my reactive data. And as long as the name corresponds to something in my reactive data, when the change event handler fires, it will update the data in my reactive store. So we'll say, let's see, we'll capture all that information, and then we'll say this. We'll say we won't. I guess before we get any further than this, I'm going to say if let's see, if data.name equals undefined, will return. So that means if it no. There's a better solution. What is it? If not data dot has own property of name. That should be data, not date. Okay, so this way we're not going to be confusing like falsy values, right? Because if I may want to actually initiate one of these data values with like thing, but I may want to initiate it as undefined, right? So that would be falsy. I want to actually just check whether the property like exists. Yeah, you don't trust JavaScript that much. If it was like a real big time application, I may not do that. The reason why, or if I'm working on a big team, the reason why that wouldn't be great is because there's not a very clear relationship between this data and this completely separate component and the name of those inputs. So again, I'm doing this for convenience because kind of being, my camera died. Oh shoot, my camera wasn't plugged in. 1 second, folks. All right, we'll see. Hopefully that gets my battery. Are you gonna wake up? It's awake. Hopefully that will solve the problem. But yeah, I think in this case, for convenience sake, it's a small project. I'm the only developer. I'm fine with, in this case, being a little bit lazy. Thanks. Okay, so that should handle a little bit of the updating the reactive data correctly. Now, the only thing that we need is proof that we're updating it correctly. And we need, let's see, I guess there may be a couple of ways to do this. I think what I'm going to do is pass the data into this component, the entire data object. So we're going to say, I could use, let's see, because this thing needs to know about the width, it needs to know about the height, it needs to know about the location and the time of day. So I could express all of those as separate properties, or I can just express it as one object. And expressing it as an object is convenient, but again, kind of risky because it can be too flexible. But, you know, if I've already been lazy once, I might as well continue to be lazy. So I'm going to say, hey, setting scene component, the data that you're looking for corresponds to the entire reactive data for the app component, even the information that you're not going to be interested in, such as the trainer data or the opponent data. So now back up here, we can say, similar to the emit, we can say props equals define props, which I think I've used somewhere else. Let me just make sure I got this. Is that the only place I've used it? No. There you go. Okay, cool. Takes an object. Great. Define props. I'm going to give it an object. The first prop that it's going to expect is called data. Data is going to be a type of object. Object, comma. And we're just going to say that it is required. Required true. What are you complaining about? Unexpected token. Data. Props is an object. That's my key. I think that's right. That may have just been unexpected token. Anyone see? Why are you not splitting your components in their own file? Why am I not splitting my components in their own file? I'm not sure what you mean by that. I'm literally doing that right now. I'm going to need some more explanation on what you mean. Okay, so the props. Data. What is poop? Your app file is really big. Oh, yeah, no, that's what we're covering today. Before you guys joined, I basically went through this whole app and built out the functionality. Just kind of loosey-goosey, just got things to work. That's also why it doesn't really look great. I mean, it looks okay, but literally almost all of the styles are from this like utility, or not utility, this like base CSS reset. So I haven't spent a lot of time styling stuff. So we just got things working, and now we're going through and doing the refactor to kind of componentize things, as you just pointed out. So why is this? This feels like this red squiggly is kind of a mistake. So I'm just going to keep going here, and I'm going to say that this v input will set the value to data.width as expected. Looking at that, we can see it's not working. No, it is working. There's my width. Now I'm passing the 600 default value from my app. You could have a valid reason to not do so, and you do. I could have a valid reason to not make my app huge. You know what? I have a lot of invalid reasons to do a lot of the things that I do. So I don't think your logic is going to work here, because I am, what is it? Chaotic neutral, I think. Okay, so now we have this bound information. So I'm actually curious, because the data prop that we're receiving here, I can have a legitimate reason for it being all in one file. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it kind of, there is a legit reason to have a very long file. In Vutensils, actually, the v input component is all one pretty long file, but that's because all of the logic is pretty interconnected. And in this case, app.view has a couple of boundaries where logic is pretty clearly separate, which is a good sign for abstracting into components. And in our case, we definitely have that, right? Like the logic over here is pretty well defined as its own encapsulated layer or boundary. The only information that needs to penetrate that boundary is the data, which we put into, I'll just use this to represent the app or like the parent component. So the data needs to penetrate that boundary so that it can be passed from the form to the parent app and then back down to the preview. So I think, yeah, we went through that kind of at the beginning of the stream, like some of the logic around where and why we would encapsulate. So let's see. What was I doing? Oh, yeah. I wanted to see, because we are defining a reactive data object here, and then we're literally passing that reactive data object to our component here. I'm wondering if making changes to that object will actually reflect in other places. And we would see that by, if I make changes here, I would be curious to see if that change would happen on the preview. So I'm going to move up, and it looks like it is, which is in fact really handy. One of the very handy things about Vue is it has a very excellent reactivity model, which means that whole spiel about me doing using the event delegation means we may not actually need to do that, at least not for the time being. So let's keep that off for now. How many of these object entries functions do you have? Looks like an easy way to start by putting them in a new file. The object entries, like these guys, just 2. Yeah, these are kind of these are here because they could totally go in their own separate file. We may do that. We'll see. I want to get to the end of this other refactor and see how big this file is. If this file is small enough that the overhead of looking at this is not so great, then I'm just going to leave it, because sometimes adding a new file itself is a greater mental overhead than just having it in line. So let's see. In settings.vue, we have our props. We have the select preset. We have the data, which is coming in from props. This is a weird thing about Vue that I'm discovering. These are helpers, so I would start there. Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I'm not going to start there. I'm going to go with the big chunks first. And once I get rid of all the big chunks, then we'll see what's left. Another thing I don't like about Vue with the composition API right now, when you define your props, you get this props object, and you want to define. I mean, I guess I could just not define it, right? I could just say define props, and then I have data. Right now, you can see that it's kind of blurred out or opaque, because it's not being used within my script, or it's not being referenced. And the weird thing about this is that, yeah. No, I get that. So yeah, the thing that I don't like is you define this props, but then in your template, you can either refer to props directly with the props key. So here I called it data, and I can refer to it directly, which is convenient, but it doesn't actually make a lot of sense, because really this is props.data, right? Conveniently, I can actually use both. Now that I've used it in the template, you can see that props is no longer semi-opaque. Now it's being referenced. So it's happy. And it still works. It's just kind of a weird thing that's like, I don't know if I love that. It's convenient, but I don't know if I love it, because it's not as explicit. And of course, people that like React would say like, that's a detriment, right? It's not explicit of what's going on. There's a little bit of magic that it's doing for you. Sometimes I like the magic when I understand it. In this case, yeah, I don't know. Okay, so let's see. We've got the data. It's being updated automatically because we're using reactivity, which is actually not even true anymore. Okay. Is it? Oh, no. Wait, I think I know what's going on. That's because we're just binding to the value. We're not actually listening for a change event. So if I change this to vModel, and then we change this back to props, because it would be pretty embarrassing for me to have that whole spiel about why I didn't like it, and then I did it anyway. And then, yep, we update that. Cool. Looks like it's working. Any prop validation with a colon is an executable prop container, right? It's bound. It's a bound attribute. Yes. So if I wanted, like in React, you would say like label equals, and then you'd use curly braces to get some executable JavaScript reference, I guess. With Vue, you use v-bind : but then there is a shorthand for it, is you can just use colon. And those are the equivalent between Vue and React way of doing things. Yeah. So let's see, what do we got here? We've got our with binding correctly, which means we no longer need this information. I think that is just working as expected. I should probably be like dumping the state of the app out so I can actually see if things change, but this is fine. So now let's take this off and let's move it down there. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing here. We know that we're going to get the props with the height for us. So this can actually work, I think, exactly the same as the width. So that should, yeah, we're getting that in. And as we move that up and down, that's working correctly. And then we can take this one. What am I trying to do here? I want this to be like there. That's what I want. And then we've got the location, which I think also works the same. So props.data.location, because it is a bound property, it should work as expected. This should be on change. Am I allowed to use sentence enhancers? If by sentence enhancers you mean fancy words that make you sound intelligent, yes, feel free. I'm not sure what you mean by sentence enhancers, though. Okay, so now we've got this locations, displayed locations. It's referencing something. This is fucking amazing. Sentence enhancers. Now I know exactly what you mean. Yes. Which part is fucking amazing? The app? Vue, perhaps? I wouldn't be surprised if you said Vue. Sentence enhancers. I love it. That's also a very clever way to get someone to trick someone to say, yeah, go ahead and use explicit language. Oh, that was the example. Yeah, gotcha. Well, okay, so you're not saying my stream is fucking amazing. That's a little bit of a disappointing letdown. I like Vue probably because I like Svelte. Yeah, they're very similar. Okay, displayed locations is what I want. So we've got the locations object, which means this is information that is only going to exist within our component over here. This is actually, I think, Stony Eagle. So this was kind of to your point of why not put these into a helper. And in fact, this is data that I would not put into a helper. Or a utility, like, or a data file somewhere, because I think that this is so closely isolated just to this component. Maybe if this component was like complex enough that it needed its own folder, then the data could be abstracted into like the root of that folder. But I think that this doesn't need a separate file because it's not going to be information that's shared anywhere else throughout the application. So my personal preference is to have this information. In fact, I may have done this a little bit more fancy than it needed to be. Maybe not. I kind of forget. But let's see here. Let me finish refactoring, and then and then I'll tell you if I made the right call. So, naming promise with B as your witness. When you reach affiliate, you'll gift 5 subs. Oh, that'd be nice. I am. Yeah, I'm actually pretty close. I think I only need more people to watch on a regular basis. It's just the like the average, whatever. But that would be very generous of you, and mwah, it's lovely. It makes me happy to hear that. Okay. The locations, displayed locations should now be in our app. So we have the displayed locations. Now I am going to do what I said I should have done because joining the lurk mode when I have no time then. That would be very nice. Yeah, that'd be cool. I appreciate that. You guys are awesome. So what was I? Oh yeah, I'm going to put the. I'm going to dump the data, all of the data, into right below my form. I think. So down here, yo Stony, check this out because this is actually really nice compared to React. If I just want to dump my data, I can just do data. I don't need to do JSON stringify or anything, and it gets this nicely spaced information, nice and easy. Okay, so we've got the location is mountain. I want to see if I change that. It's not updating. Okay, so that's not updating. That's why we needed the function that's set the. Well, that doesn't make sense. Props.data.location. When this changes, this actually should map to my data here. Where's my location? Is the location or grass? Oh, did I not? Okay, location is mountain, location is grass. It's not changing. Using. Yeah, all right. I've never done Laravel. I wish there were some tools in the React ecosystem that were a little bit more like Ruby on Rails or Laravel, where it just kind of has solved a lot of the actual real world application building stuff, the server side rendering apps. It's just solved so much of those problems, like authorization, taking payments, doing routing, all of the things that you need for every single app. And it feels like a lot of React projects that I've joined, you're like rebuilding from scratch. Don't worry, I'm not going to Laravel anytime soon. But I do wish that there were things like it in JavaScript world. And I'm sure that there's projects that claim to be, but I don't know. JavaScript developers are funny. If we're not reinventing the wheel, we're not truly alive. Okay, so my location is not changing when I change my input. So let's do this. We are going to copy this little utility function here. And we're going to put it in here, and we're just going to say, I mean, why is this not changing? Props.data.location should be changing. At change, we're going to log that change. Yeah, I don't want to go back. So if I don't want to go back to Laravel, why are you using Laravel? Riddle me this. No, the other way around. If I went to Laravel, I wouldn't want to go back to JavaScript. Yeah, okay, but JavaScript is definitely that love-hate, what is it, masochist language where it hurts so good. I do love some JavaScript. You know what's really nice that Laravel can't touch on JavaScript? Hybrid applications in a single language. And I know that the promise of that has not really delivered, which has been which was like my comment earlier that I wish JavaScript had that like real good full stack app. Remix Run is getting there though. Remix Run is real good. But yeah, all of like server side and client side rendered from your single code base. You got to explain that definition. Yeah, hybrid apps. Sorry, Kotin. Hybrid apps are essentially when you have a single code base. Well, I guess we have to kind of rewind a little bit and define server side or server rendered applications and client rendered applications. So you have a server and you have a client. The client is like the user's browser. So my browser, what you guys are watching this show on, right? This is a good example. Everyone, we're watching on twitch.com or twitch.tv, and Twitch has in the browser on your guys' end is your client side. And then somewhere on, I don't know, probably AWS servers is the backend like logic that's running. So when you use JavaScript, because JavaScript is the only programming language that can run both on the server and in the browser. I mean, I guess with the exception of WebAssembly, but just forget about WebAssembly for a sec. JavaScript is the only programming language that can run on the server and in the client. It means that from the same code base, without having to change language or context or whatever, you can have your application, you can build your application, run it in a node environment and get the exact same HTML output that you would if you ran that code on the browser and got that exact same HTML output, which means it's handy. I mean, it's mostly handy for managing those two environments from a single code base. So you don't have to know different languages. You can have people that are cross-functional that just like work on the same code base. And mostly you're not like context switching. So that is like a hybrid. Yeah, a hybrid application is one that is written to run both on the server rendered app and client rendered. So if you like load the app the first time, maybe it's like rendered on the server, all of that HTML. What does Next.js do? Next.js can technically run in multiple different ways, but Next.js kind of does this hybrid approach where when a request from the user comes in to a server, the server that's running Next.js or running Node, I guess, Node will use Next.js to build out the HTML for that page. It will take that HTML, send it as a response to the browser. The browser will then render it. So that was the server side rendering side of things. And once the browser renders that HTML, part of that HTML payload is also the client side JavaScript. And once that client side JavaScript lands in the browser, it takes over the rest of the application's navigation and things like that. So when you go from the home page to like page 2, instead of making another request to the server and Next.js or whatever node redoing that whole process of generating the HTML and returning it, instead of that, the client side bundle is going to say, don't worry, I got this. It's going to use the client side JavaScript to build the HTML, replace the parts on the page that need to be replaced, and update the view. And it generally makes for kind of a sort of snappier experience for users. They don't have to do the whole page refreshes and rebuilds. It can also save them some data because instead of getting the entire HTML as a payload, they might just get like small sections of JSON. So there's a lot of positives to doing things that way. I think the biggest positive, in my opinion, is as developers, just the maintenance of the project, because JavaScript is responsible for both rendering the server and rendering the client, and the consolidation step is sort of handled by these frameworks. Yeah, with Livewire, you don't write JavaScript. So you do the PHP, HTML, and CSS. Yeah, I think that looks really interesting. I'm not sold on that. I know that I think like did Basecamp invent Livewire, or they kind of have their own version of sending little packets of HTML that are updated for like little parts of the application on demand. Um, I'm very curious about that, and I would be totally happy with that being a solution that works. I'm kind of skeptical right now. I'm on the fence of like I'll watch and see, and if they can figure it out and it's a nicer interface, that sounds great. I think an issue that I might have with that is how does Livewire handle it? The user makes a request, Livewire makes the JavaScript that goes to the server, communicates with the server. The server builds the HTML as like a little, just the section of HTML it needs. HTML comes back in that response. Livewire takes that response and updates just the little part of the page that needs to be updated with that HTML. But what if that HTML also needs JavaScript to, like, I don't know, have an event listener or something like that? Oh, you guys were not supposed to see that. I just got a notification. These are supposed to be off. But yeah, like how does that part I don't understand, but I don't know. We'll see. Stony Eagle, I love how much you love PHP. It makes me feel good that someone out there is so stoked on it. But I think if you're trying to convert me, that might be a long, arduous journey. Which, if you're in for it, I'm in for it. Let's do this. We can develop a long, beautiful relationship together on the foundation of you trying to convince me things that I know are wrong. Ooh, we're getting into the lo-fi now. Kotin. Yeah, man. Kotin, you know what? You've just been around and you've been such a kind person that you don't get to see the spicy side of me, but I got some thorns, man. Definitely. Yeah, that's another thing is frameworks that are really good about handling database modeling and stuff, and just make all that like authentication is so hard. I wish there was a framework that really did that well with JavaScript. Okay, I'm going to figure out this problem because I want to I have 2 inputs and then I'm done for today. So let me finish this. So we have this change event. So what we were doing before, that's the problem, is we are receiving this. Where's the props? We're receiving this data, data props, which has that reactive thing, and it was working just fine. Oh, I wonder if this is a problem. I wonder if this is a problem with my library and not my actual, not this app. So let's see. If we have a select, we're going to give it a name of location. We're going to say, just like for now, we're just going to say location so I can see it. Select ID doesn't really matter. We're going to say, sure, even that's fine. Those are my locations. And I want to see if this V model is working correctly or not. This should be enough to test my hypothesis. If I change this, it is a problem with my library, not a problem with my code. Okay, that's good to know. Yep, and that's what all these warnings are about. Cool, valid type on something invalid. Okay, that's something I got to fix outside of the stream. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave this the way it's supposed to work if it was actually not a problem with V input. And we're going to get rid of this. We're going to uncomment all that, which means this is what our new settings scene component should look like. So we do a little bit of data manipulation. That Stony Eagle is just, it's like nails on a chalkboard looking at the stream right now. So I'm just going to leave this on for like 15 more seconds. Let the effect really soak in. I'm just kidding. I'm being unnecessarily spicy. Shame on me. There you go. That one, my bad. But what we have is, so a little bit of data definition that we have that's only relevant to this component. And then we define some props that this component is expecting to receive. It's going to receive an object called data, which is required. I need to figure out the TypeScripty way to put the annotation on this data two functions that do the exact same thing. All right, fine. We're gonna say, why am I even listening to you? I mean, the real thing is like, why am I even using these functions at all? And there was, okay, I'm gonna teach you all a very important lesson. Is that the way that code works is an iterative process. Yeah, this is okay. My tagline when I was at a company a couple years ago, I worked with this like absolutely brilliant person. I mean, like you, just a person that could practically just speak binary to computers. You know, like super smart. And every time I would do a pull request, he would make some comments on some things that were a little bit off. You know, like why are you doing things this way? Why is it like that? And my response was always, it's a legitimate response, but it's always that it was an iterative process. So, you know, you start writing code one way and you get to a certain point and things are working, and then there's some wrench in the system, wrench in the cogs that like throws things off, or you didn't consider this use case. So you have to go back to the drawing board and redo things, right? So I didn't start writing this code with this in mind, most likely. But I also got to a point where this is working and, you know, whatever. Map entries to key value. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, you get to a point and it's like I iterated or more importantly, if you're doing a code review on someone else's work, I don't mind so much if people call me out and whatever, say like something looks dumb, and you know, I can admit when something looks dumb. But it's actually really important to keep this in mind, is that other people have feelings, and we're working with people, and keeping in mind that no one writes perfect code the first time, and it is an iterative process, is really important, because when you're doing code review, just, I don't know, practice empathy and yeah, be kind. I say, as I've been throwing out saucy comments all day. Look at this guy. Anyway, there are some little nuggets of wisdom, I hope, in my streams every once in a while, and I really hope that practice empathy is a good one. Yeah. So why did I do it that way to begin with? I feel like I was using, let me see, locations. No, I guess there really, by the end of the day, there really was no reason to do it this way. No, I do remember. I think the reason we did it this way was because we were going to add TypeScript type definitions. And something about doing it with like object.entries, I was going to show like how to do things a certain way. It didn't work out. So we actually don't need that. If I wanted to, let's see. Yeah, like it's only used locations. It's only used there. So really, I think the solution here to refactor is not to use these and then write a function that, like, the same function that does the same thing and returns it. I think I would just say displayed locations equals. Let me see. What I would do is go to my console, clear it, do that, and then copy this over. And then paste that there, cut this, paste that there, and then hit enter, and then I'd just go and like copy this. To be honest, I think this is the right solution. I wear this badge with pride. I did bring it on. No, it's great. You know what? I just got that sense that we're good. We're good. No hard feelings. I had fun talking smack and being put in my place. Okay, so I think this is the right solution. Is we're just going to refactor that, because after all, Stony Eagle is right. This looked like butt code, and we don't want to keep butt code, right? This is a stream about learning after all. So let's do that. So now we don't even need extra complicated function that does a bunch of stuff. We can just kind of, let's see, copy that same thing. I probably don't even need to. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say, do that, make an object, and then hopefully GitHub Copilot comes through with the clutch move, sets me up with that. I can then get rid of all this. There we go. What is looking wrong there? Man, sometimes VS Code does not get these things right. But I think this is the way that I would do it. Is just, if this is what I need, just start with what I need. No need to overcomplicate things. That is distracting. Yeah, GitHub Copilot is great. So that's the code that I need. I think what you know what the real solution actually could have been is one thing I want to do in my Vutensils library is actually make it so that it can support this syntax. Because if I can just support this and pass this into my list of options, that's the right solution. Anyway, for the time being, I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of this. This is my final refactor for the day. I've got my data. Local data that's static and only relevant to this project or this component. And then we've got the prop definitions. We've got the description of the events that are being emitted. We've got some more data here. So let's pull that up into, yeah, we're going to pull that up next to the other data. Kind of it's kind of annoying that one of them is an array, one of them is a map, but I think I'll survive. Don't need this console log. And then we have this custom function for selecting presets, which is the first function. Yeah, this is fine. This is good. We've got our data, we've got our props, we've got our emit, and we've got a custom function. Why is it complaining? I don't know. Unexpected token. You know what? It's a this is another thing that I haven't personally solved, which is I think right now the Vue ecosystem or like my setup, I don't have the proper VS Code extensions in place. Yeah, it's a VS Code thing. Yeah, I can reload and I reload it, and I think it's still going to be there. And I don't know what it is, to be honest. It's something with my setup, and right now I have to jump back and forth between Vue 2 and Vue 3, and the extensions that you need for Vue 2 don't correspond with the ones for Vue 3. So maybe it's something like that. I'm not too worried about it. It's a little red squiggly. It's fine. It's fine. Okay, that is it for the day. I am going to call it there because if I don't, I think we reached a good stopping point. Almost everything still works. Update data. We actually aren't even using that, and we may not even need to use it. So I think I'm going to just comment that out since we're not using it. Yeah, I'm feeling good about this. We still have kind of a big file here, but this is all going to be abstracted down as well into their own components. And then we're going to have a nice, much more approachable app.vue file that hopefully with a little bit of cross fingers and prayers, Stony Eagle will allow us to, will give us a seal of approval. Team no semi, huh? Use semicolons, you lazy. They get injected. I don't need to. You know what? To be honest, I don't even know. I just let VS Code do the thing. And when I hit Control S, VS Code decided not to. So, oh man, you're all against me. What did I do to deserve this? What did I do to deserve this, audience? All right, folks. I'm calling it. Does anyone want to hang out for a raid? Because there's this girl named Melody who is learning JavaScript, who's really kind and nice. And sometimes I jump on after my stream to help her walk through some like little beginner tutorial stuff. So how's that feel? Oh, let's see. Yep. Being friends with B. Yeah, it's been great. I'm really glad that I got to meet you, Brent. You've been awesome. All right, I'm going to go raid Melody, and we'll see how she is doing. Raid Melody Dev. Oh, no. Raid. There you go. All right. Cool. Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. I will catch you. I'll be back on Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Pacific Standard. And Stony, I'm going to try and catch one of yours because I got to figure out what time that is again. I think you said 8 a.m. So we'll see. All right. I'll see you. Raid is on.